that creates advantages and increases connectivity comes at a price at the moment. It's not so innocent anymore. You can make a good use of it, but also you can use it to influence the correlation of power, especially in Eurasia. And this is what we are witnessing now between the United States and China. And to end my opening remark, for the last 400 years, or almost 500 years, the strategic flows at the most were happening in the world ocean. That was a free maritime highway. So sea powers usually had a structural advantage over the land-based empires. With aviation, with the railroad system, already we've witnessed a shift in the 19th and 20th century that created Germany and Soviet Union, and this attempt to also change the structure of strategic flows. And that resulted in 2 world wars and the Cold War. And now in the 21st century, with the advent of yet more increased connectivity of network grid, everything that is related to this modernity and technology, the land masses of Eurasia, things that are further from the world ocean, will relatively benefit from new technologies, and that also changes the calculation in great power competitions.
Great, thank you very much. Robert, I wanted to bring you in now. Jacek mentioned a kind of new Cold War in technology. And I think from my knowledge of your public statements and your interests, it's fair to call you a technology cold warrior. Can you please tell us a little bit about your background, along with serving in Washington, including in the White House? You've lived in China. Can you tell me a little bit, in the context of Jacek's remarks, about how we have now, after a generation of digital development in which we assumed that data, technology, and talent will be relatively free to flow across global borders, why in your mind does that need to change? Can you just give us a little bit of your personal story and kind of how you came to that kind of conclusion?
Yeah, I think so. I started looking at this when I was at the Pentagon in 2014, really deeply trying to understand how strategic competition had changed in the 21st century. And there's a couple of things that you come to the realization of. One is, to Jacek's point, I think if you look at the Atlantic Charter as kind of a template for the world that we tried to build after World War II, it was based on kind of 4 principles: free trade, democratic principles, rule of law, and self-determination. And I think what broke down at the end of the Cold War, specifically on the basis of how we chose to embrace the not democracies of the world in terms of creating a foreign policy on the basis of open markets lead to wealth, so an economic theory, and wealth leads to democracy, a social theory, the theory of modernization. We created a system which allowed for movement from a market-based kind of allocation of resources globally to one that is both market-based, but at the same time based on national strategy. And so when you take the market-based system and you enforce another, in this case, number 2 economy, not counting the EU, but that essentially does not revolve around market-based resource allocation, then you bring challenges economically to democracies. That's number 1. Number 2, on a technology basis, the rise of the internet, and particularly to your point, Kevin, about data, the ability to aggregate and then analyze large reams of data, essentially allows you to create, both in large tech companies and in totalitarian regimes, the ability to have aggregation of power. And so as you have these non-market-based economic flows going on, and you have the aggregation of power in tech companies and totalitarian regimes, then you create geopolitical outcomes that don't favor democratic principles. And so in a lot of ways, we created a system and we let it grow without actually understanding the strategic and geostrategic implications, either to our economies in terms of how would it affect industrial base, how would it affect equality in terms of income equality in democratic nations, but also how it impacted democratic principles in terms of allowing these economic and financial and informational connections to be drivers of social outcomes in our countries, in our democratic countries.
Thank you. Jayshree, I wanted to now ask you to maybe give us some of your thoughts about, so Robert just described the situation that we're facing now. And right now is a very momentous time, I think, in the development of the global technology system, because we are on the cusp of really starting to roll out 5G. So I was curious to get your thoughts from a technologist's perspective of how 5G really changes this debate, in thinking about the importance of data, in thinking about the importance of global strategic flows, and in thinking about strategic technology competition. In your view, what is it about 5G that is the most important thing that has really set this geopolitical debate alight just in the last few years?
Sure. So before I answer that question, I think it's very important to understand what cyberspace is. Cyberspace is a system that has about 14 layers of technologies. You start from the physical layer to all the way to the DNA layer that is emerging. Now, each of these layers is made of different technologies, different protocols, different processes, and how they interact with each other. That is what makes the cyberspace. So now this cyberspace, we are not looking at it in silo, because cyberspace has now connected with geospace, it has connected with aquaspace, and it has connected with space. And it has also connected individuals and entities across nations, its government, industries, organizations, and academia. So it has connected pretty much the entire human ecosystem. Now, when we talk about 5G, why is that so important? Because if you look at 5G, what it is going to do, it is going to activate the entire Internet of Things ecosystem. That is why it is so very important. And who owns it, who owns that power, who controls that technology, is becoming understandably a geopolitical power play, because it is not about 5G technology, it's about the algorithm that is going to run that technology. So if, right now what the concern is that the China that has come out with the technology, if it gets widely used all across nations, then the China's technology algorithm is going to pretty much activate the entire IoT ecosystem all across nations. And if it does that, then China has the power of knowing everything that goes on across nations, because it will have data from the homes, businesses, governments, everywhere. Wherever the IoT ecosystem is, wherever the devices are, they are going to get the data. And if they get the data, by using machine learning, they are going to find the patterns, and they will get the intelligence. So that is why there is so much backlash. It's not the technology or how cheap it is, or how they may have whichever means they have used to develop the technology. That is not the conflict here. The conflict here is the algorithm that is going to rule the world. And the same goes for blockchain also. Who is going to control that technology? So that is at the power play, and that is the huge amounts of data that are going to emerge. It's going to give a lot of intelligence, and that's why nations are very, very cautious right now where to go and with who to go.
Just back to Robert quickly. Can you tell us a little bit about when the penny really dropped for the United States government as far as coming to the realization that it wanted to change its approach to the way 5G was taking shape? Because it really has been a pretty remarkable shift against previous generations of mobile network development. I think keeping some of these risks that Jayshree's highlighted in mind, what really was it in sort of the inner workings of the US government that changed circa 2017 to really shift the policy towards a much more aggressive approach to countering China in 5G?
Yeah, I think so. If you look at our debate and discussion of where the national security strategy needed to go, within about 3 months in the summer of 2017, we had essentially established, hey, we have a different world. We need to address it as it is, not as we would like it to be. And I think that document coming out in December of 2017, if you understand the U.S. system, it takes a while to matriculate. And as you begin to understand the premise behind the document, then and as departments and agencies in the federal bureaucracy begin to react to that and essentially try to implement the vision behind it, then you have the realization that data, as it says in the document, is a strategic resource. The fact that the United States essentially has abdicated any kind of industrial policy and not focused on technology development per se in the commercial sector, and seen as how the aggregation of data, particularly with integration of machines to the 4G context, you create this world that, quite frankly, we need to catch up to. And so I think that's where, you know, the Defense Department, the State Department, you know, all of these departments and agencies begin to start wrestling with the fact, what do we need to do as a country to get this back in terms of a platform, or not a platform, but a system, and certainly a series of relationships, our bilateral and multilateral relationships that drive geopolitical outcomes that advantage, you know, U.S. national interests, but really democratic principles writ large.
Nikodem, I'm curious how you, as the CEO of a telecommunications company in Europe, how you view these kind of debates and how you view the policy pressure that's now coming from the United States. Is it affecting your decision making as the head of a telecommunications firm, and if so, how?
Yes, I think that basically the dispute between the United States and China over hegemony in the internet, because basically the conflict is about who will be the big brother of the next big brother, who should be the big brother of the internet, is bringing also much more to the table than just a conflict between one superpower and a nation who wants to be a superpower. Because from the Polish perspective, our basic political philosophy is built about the idea of being a sovereign nation. And in the past it was easy to answer, what does it mean to be sovereign? We just want to have our own democratic state and our own army. And right now we are living in the digital age, and it's much harder to answer does it mean to be sovereign in cyberspace. And I think that basically for the nation like Poland and other nations in Europe, and basically all the governments in the free world, it's a notion of being able to tell our citizens that you are free in the internet or in the cyberspace, that we as a state assure your freedom and assure your security in the cyberspace. And it's a simple idea, but it's very hard to articulate, because we don't want the Russian or the Chinese answer, which means the state will close the cyberspace, and if we have a